When we think about memory, we tend to picture pictures, stories, and specific moments we can consciously bring to mind. But the deepest memories aren't stored only in the mind. They live far down inside the body. They get written into the nervous system, held in the muscles, wrapped into the breath, and carried in the way the heart learns to guard itself. This is exactly why someone can say they've moved on, forgiven, or forgotten, and still feel restless, anxious, or hollow without knowing why. The body remembers what the mind tries to run from. For the narcissist, this is especially true. So much of who they are is built on a base of denial, on constantly reshaping the past to protect a version of themselves they can live with. They might tell themselves that what they did was fair, blown out of proportion, or totally misread. They might even talk the people around them into believing that same story. But the nervous system doesn't respond to made-up stories. It responds to what's real. And when what's real keeps getting avoided, it shows up as ongoing physical and emotional tension. There's a real reason why so many people who hurt others end up living in a state of constant unease or quiet unhappiness. It's not because fate or karma is punishing them. It's because their bodies are holding on to experiences they never let themselves fully feel. Guilt, shame, fear, and grief don't just disappear because someone chooses to ignore them. They simply go underground. They come back out as constant restlessness, sudden anger, feeling emotionally numb, or a nonstop need for distraction. Anything that isn't properly worked through eventually turns into heavy internal pressure. From a psychological view, trauma isn't only what happens to us. Trauma is what happens inside us when we can't process what happened. When the narcissist caused harm, they also created a deep wound inside themselves at the same time. But instead of facing that reality, they built a false version of themselves to protect against the pain. They learned to control, perform, and manipulate so they'd never have to face the full weight of what they'd done. But the real price of that constant avoidance is a state of ongoing disconnection from their own inner world. This is why no amount of outside success, praise, or attention ever really fills them up. Their nervous system is still holding on to that unresolved experience. It's still bracing for impact. It's still watching for danger. It's still holding everything that was never let go. They might look confident on the surface, but underneath, there's often a quiet storm they can't even put into words. They carry a constant sense that something is missing, something is off, and something is still unsettled. And here's where the truth becomes impossible to avoid. The body has zero interest in fooling itself. It's naturally built to move toward wholeness. It looks for real resolution, not a well-rehearsed act. When a person won't let themselves feel their emotions, the body ends up holding everything that was denied. Every attempt to run from the past only tightens the hold of what's still unhealed. For you, understanding this can feel deeply freeing. It moves the whole story away from wanting revenge and puts it firmly into reality. You don't need them to admit what they did to you. You don't need their validation or an apology from the person who hurt you. The consequences are already happening on their own, not through some outside punishment, but through the plain, unavoidable way being human works. What isn't faced keeps getting carried. What isn't healed keeps repeating. What isn't felt gets permanently stored away. You were never crazy for feeling the full weight of what happened. Your nervous system was just reacting to the truth. And now, as you work to heal, you're finally letting go of what was never really yours to carry in the first place. There's another important layer to this that often gets missed. It's not just the harm they caused that stays with them, but also the vibrant parts of you they tried so hard to wipe out. The confidence they made fun of, the sensitivity they brushed off, the boundaries they resented, and the inner light they tried to dim. None of that simply vanishes. Instead, it becomes a lasting, silent presence in their inner world, a constant reminder of something they couldn't control or destroy. When someone tries to break another person, they're actually showing what scares them the most. Your strength, your depth, and your ability to love and feel were never weaknesses. They were clear mirrors reflecting back everything the narcissist couldn't stand within themselves. They came after you not because something was wrong with you, but because you were alive in ways they simply weren't. Even now, those vibrant qualities trail behind them like a shadow they can't shake. Psychologically, this pattern comes down to projection and deep envy. The narcissist sees in you the exact traits they had to bury in themselves just to get by. Things like authenticity, vulnerability, and real emotional presence. Instead of grieving what they lost inside themselves, they try to wipe out those same traits in you. But trying to destroy those qualities in someone else never brings them peace. It only makes their inner conflict worse. What they worked so hard to destroy becomes the very thing that haunts them. They might try to start over with new relationships, new places, or new versions of themselves, but the same pattern always ends up repeating. Eventually, they run into someone who unknowingly reminds them of you, someone who carries that same light, that same independence, and that same emotional honesty. And once again, they feel that same discomfort, the same pull to control, the same urge to shrink the other person down. This pattern was never really about the other person. It's always about what's still unresolved inside them. This is why your survival and your healing aren't just personal wins. They carry real meaning. Every time you choose yourself, every time you grow, and every time you fully live your life, you become living proof of a truth they can never erase. You prove you were never the problem. Your continued existence goes directly against the false story they built to excuse their behavior. You stand as living proof that their attempts to control and destroy you never got to decide your true worth. There's also a deeper idea worth sitting with here. What we try to hurt in others is often what we've rejected in ourselves. The narcissist completely rejected their own vulnerability, their real human needs, and their deep fear of being abandoned. When they see those exact qualities showing up openly and freely in you, it stirs up a grief they can't bring themselves to face. Instead of sitting with that grief, they quickly turn it into contempt, coldness, or a need for control. But right underneath all that anger sits a deep sense of loss, the sad loss of a true self they never learned how to hold on to. So they end up carrying you with them everywhere they go, not with fondness, but as a memory, not with real affection, but as something left unfinished. The core parts of you they tried to crush become painful reminders of the honest life they kept avoiding. And no matter how far or how fast they run, they can never actually escape that. You were never meant to fade away or disappear. Your light was never theirs to take to begin with. In the quiet, unavoidable corners of their own mind, they can't get away from the truth. Your survival speaks for itself. And there's one more truth that keeps following them, the very feeling they worked hardest to bury, and that's guilt. Not the kind of guilt someone can openly admit to, but the kind that lives beneath the surface, quietly shaping their whole inner world without them even realizing it. The narcissist might keep denying they did anything wrong, keep making excuses for their harmful behavior, and keep telling themselves they were simply misunderstood. But the human mind doesn't just erase what it deep down knows to be true. Instead, it rearranges itself around that hidden knowledge. When guilt isn't consciously faced and worked through, it doesn't just disappear. It becomes a silent architect. It shapes how they see themselves, how they relate to everyone around them, and the basic way they move through life. It shows up constantly as heavy defensiveness, as pushing blame onto other people, and as a nonstop need to always be right. It appears in their complete inability to rest, their trouble ever feeling truly at ease, and their difficulty trusting anyone. The conscious mind might keep repeating the line that I did nothing wrong. But the body and the deep unconscious tell a completely different story. From a psychological angle, this is the real price of emotional disconnection. When someone keeps refusing to take real responsibility for the harm they've caused, they split their own inner world in two. One part knows exactly what happened, while another part fights hard to bury it. That ongoing inner battle creates a deep tension that never gets resolved. They stay permanently stuck in an endless loop of justifying themselves and avoiding their feelings. And inside that draining loop, real peace simply cannot be found. This is why so many people who cause deep emotional harm seem constantly restless, on edge, or never quite satisfied with their lives. They aren't being targeted or punished by some outside force. They're simply living with a serious internal contradiction. The more they deny the truth, the more stiff and fragile their personality becomes. The harder they defend their false version of events, the further they drift from their own basic humanity. Guilt, when it's actually acknowledged and felt, can open the door to repair and real change. But when it's constantly denied, it turns inward, becoming an invisible weight the body has to carry forever. Buried deep enough, guilt turns into a kind of psychological prison. There's an unavoidable truth here. We can't escape the real consequences of our actions, only how we choose to view them. The narcissist keeps reading their past through a distorted lens, but the emotional residue underneath never goes away. It quietly shapes how they see themselves in ways they can't consciously control. They might constantly chase outside praise just to feel worthy, or push for control over others just to feel safe. But these are ultimately desperate attempts to outrun something living right inside them. For you, understanding this can bring real relief and peace. You no longer have to carry the weight of their ongoing denial. You don't need them to admit what they did or offer a genuine apology for the pain they caused. The consequences are already unfolding, not through some dramatic outside punishment, but as an uncomfortable state they carry within. Their entire life gets rigidly built around avoidance, control, and emotional distance. This happens because that guarded way of living is the only way they know how to exist alongside what they refuse to face. Here's a truth that doesn't fade. Guilt that never gets healed doesn't just disappear over time. It slowly becomes the actual structure of who they are. They may never say any of this out loud, but their ongoing life already shows it clearly. What follows unacknowledged guilt isn't calm reflection, it's endless repetition. When someone flatly refuses to face what they've done, they don't move forward in life. Instead, they go in circles. The narcissist might leave one relationship, quit one job, or move somewhere completely new, truly believing they're finally getting a clean start. But the exact same destructive patterns quietly rebuild themselves every time. This happens because the deep wound driving their behavior was never actually addressed or healed. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of narcissistic behavior. Most people naturally assume that when someone exits your life, they get to walk away clean and free of any burden. But psychologically, that's just not how the human mind works. Whatever stays unhealed gets carried forward into whatever comes next. It keeps searching for a new outlet, not necessarily because the person truly wants to hurt others, but because unresolved pain demands to be felt somehow. Until that pain is honestly looked at, it will keep recreating itself. So the narcissist keeps meeting new people, forming new connections, and writing a brand new story about who they are. Yet the same underlying pattern shows up in every chapter. The early stage of idealizing someone comes back around, quickly followed by quiet control, sudden emotional pulling away, blaming others, and eventually total collapse. It's a string of different faces reading from the exact same emotional script. This doesn't happen because of bad luck, but because the human mind naturally tends to repeat what it can't resolve. From a trauma-informed view, this behavior points to a nervous system stuck permanently in survival mode. The narcissist learned very early on that being vulnerable felt dangerous. They came to believe that power and image were far safer than being genuinely themselves. Those early emotional survival tools once protected a vulnerable child, but over time, those defenses hardened into fixed personality traits. Now, even when they try to move forward, their body and mind automatically fall back on what feels familiar. They pick dominance over real closeness and control over true connection. This constant repetition isn't a sign of growth or progress. It's deep stagnation dressed up as forward motion, and it slowly wears away their life from the inside. Every completed cycle leaves behind a growing pile of emotional wreckage, including broken trust, damaged relationships, and unspoken harm. Over time, the narcissist becomes more isolated, more emotionally cut off, and more convinced that everyone else is the real problem. But underneath all that denial, there's a growing, uneasy awareness that the one common thread running through every failed relationship is them. Philosophically speaking, this is the true cost of constantly avoiding self-reflection. We often wrongly believe freedom comes from getting away from certain people, places, or hard situations. But real freedom only comes from actually facing the patterns inside ourselves. When someone refuses to look inward, they stay stuck to their own history. They keep living out the same painful chapter again and again, always hoping the ending will change somehow, without ever having to change themselves. For you, this truth offers a very different kind of closure. You weren't some failed exception to their pattern. You were simply one chapter in a much bigger, ongoing story. They'll keep repeating these same patterns well into the future. Their inability to heal means they'll keep recreating the same toxic emotional territory over and over, even long after you're gone from their life. The cycle itself is the ongoing consequence. What isn't healed is never truly left in the past. It just gets lived out all over again. As that cycle keeps repeating and the weight of it keeps building over time, something else starts happening beneath the surface. The narcissist might still look confident, successful, or even superior to everyone watching from the outside. But internally, the structure holding their whole identity together keeps growing more and more fragile.